Hello and welcome back. So, having just uploaded a video on spiritual awakening, I realized that a 3 minute video is not long enough. So, I decided to upload a video here, a longer video. For anyone who's going through a spiritual awakening right now, for anyone who is in the beginning stages, the first year, for 6 months, even. And a lot of the stuff here that I'm going to say might be helpful for people years in as well, because everyone's spiritual journey goes at a different pace. Not good or bad, it just does. So one of the first things that happen during a spiritual awakening, and this is an intense one. There are some that are gradual. I'm speaking about the intense, all of a sudden it feels like you're in heaven type of spiritual awakening, and it came out of nowhere. And you're wondering what's real and am I losing my mind? Now, anyone that's going through a spiritual awakening will have thoughts like this in their mind. And at the same time, we have a knowing that it's not. So what I mean by that is whatever your mind is telling you, you know deep down inside if it's right or wrong. You can tell. Even though your mind might feel confused or disbelief, you will know as a feeling deep down inside of you that it's good, it's okay. The mind has all kinds of these insertions, these little things that it will do. And these are all things that we've learned throughout our lives. We all have a certain conditioning. So maybe you're very skeptical by nature, and anything that happens, the mind needs to categorize it, put it in a box so that it can fit it into its own understanding before it can accept it as something that's real or not. And when you're going through a spiritual awakening, one question that might come into your mind is this real? And what is happening? So the mind wants to know what, usually first. And that's okay. Because as you go through this what phase, the mind will start to recognize that it doesn't really help that much. That there are these things that are happening now to you, and you can see how each one of these things that happen seem to be guiding you to a specific direction, to a point. You know, you're here, and without really trying, each experience you have, it's like, oh, that happened, and then the mind can look back at everything that happened, and it starts to kind of make sense. So, as it starts to make sense, the mind might want to take this and add it to its knowing. There's an inner knowing, and then there's your mind knowing. And there's a very big difference between the two, and it's important that we understand this because it can create a block on your spiritual development. The inner knowing can have confusion in your mind, and you'll still know. If you have no confusion and you think you know, that can stop you from moving forward. Once you think you know something, what happens is the mind puts it down. but it doesn't allow it to grow anymore. It doesn't put it down in the sense that it has accepted it. It puts it down in the sense that it stands on it and prevents it from growing. Because now the mind says, I know, and I don't need to learn anything else. A new ego can develop. I know this, I know that, I have this experience, I know this, I know that. And a new ego, a spiritual ego, can develop. Now you'll notice inside of yourself that you can see this is the wrong path. There's going to be temptation. You're going to recognize that certain things that happen within you, you could develop. You're going to see that. And you're also going to see that you're going to know whether or not it's right for you or not. Even though the temptation might still be there, in order to follow that inner feeling, long story short, your mind can stop you. It can stagnate. The mind can, it's almost as though the mind can create a dam stopping the flow of water. And all that water will build up behind in the form of the old you, anxiety, tension. When you're going through the spiritual journey, learning to put the mind aside, not shutting it down, but learning to see what you see and then not allowing what your mind thinks to hijack your behavior, to hijack what you're going to do next. Allowing a thought to come in, it will play itself, and then allowing it to go, remaining in the moment. You may notice that you start doing things that your mind isn't thinking of, or that you thought about doing or planned. All of a sudden you find yourself dancing. You find yourself smiling for no reason. You find yourself just standing there in the sun, taking in the rays. And your mind can come up with all these whys and try to create a story. And it's kind of nice. Your mind is nice. It's a nice place. It can be a very nice place. It can be very sweet. Your mind can add a lot of sweetness to an experience. That can also flare up your ego. Liking or disliking is the job of your ego. Not to say that it's bad. It's not bad if you like something. But if you recognize that you like something, let's say you're standing in the sun, and here's how the mind can block. All of a sudden a cloud comes, you like the sun, boom, the cloud is there, you don't like the cloud. And all of a sudden that whole experience of bliss just became tainted by your desire to have everything be in your like category. The mind is tricky. The mind has all these different traps that it is set, that can set you, it can set for you, if you will. Expectation. The mind works through expectation. So this whole video really is to help you to see that whether or not you know something or you understand, it doesn't really help you that much when you're going on a spiritual journey. A lot of times being confused in the mind will let you go further. Let me explain. When a child is born and learns to speak, it does so without going to school. It does so without any help from your mind or my mind or anybody else's mind. Words, plans, things that do it like this, it will happen like this. If you do this, you will learn to read. If you do this, you will learn this language. Without any of if you do this, babies learn the language and actually do so better than what they would with a mind, with a normal, developed, adult thinking brain. And in the same way, when you're going through spiritual experience, if you don't allow your energy to stay in your mind, when I say stay, when I say this, I mean if you notice all of a sudden your attention is highly focused on what the story in your head is telling you, it's going to prevent you from really learning what it is you're supposed to be learning. It can. Now, another side of this is that part of your spiritual journey is dependent on the mind, because a lot of the spiritual journey is heavily dependent on the mind displaying something, and then your inner knowing guiding you to a different understanding. In that same way that I mentioned, you can have a thought come in and not follow it, let it go out through your mind again. In that same way that you can do that, when you notice the mind and you can see that it doesn't like the sun, you can recognize that that makes you feel unaligned. All of a sudden you're not enjoying what you were enjoying, and you can see that the mind has created certain types of things that it wants, and that it won't let you be happy unless it has what it wants. So just recognizing this even can bring up new insights, and that process of having this experience of the mind in its dislikes and likes creates new insights, which can lead you to a place that allow the mind to fall naturally more often. So as the mind comes up and creates these blocks and prevents certain things, it's actually helping. So never try to stop something. Always go with the flow. And if you notice that you're deeply in the experience of whatever it is that you're having at the moment, that the mind itself disappears. And that if you only want the mind to be gone, then that's another want. So everything that happens will happen. Everything will have a lesson in it. There's no good lesson or bad lesson. There's only an experience, and then working through on whatever level you are. And you're going to notice that as you go through this process, you begin to change, and you begin to have more faith, and your mind will at a certain point not need to know. It may be interested in the same way you might read a novel, but it doesn't need to know, in the sense that if it doesn't read the last page, it won't let you sleep. So what I mean by that is the mind has a tendency sometimes it won't stop until you've exhausted what it's showing you. So sometimes you got to go through this process, and once you get to a certain point that you don't need the mind to understand, in the same way that you can stop a book even without reading the last page, your mind doesn't care anymore. Your mind doesn't need to know. And once you don't need to know, you're continually in a state of open receptivity. And then the new can come in. Instead of having a rigid understanding generated by the mind, new experiences come in. And you never really feel so much that you know everything on the intellectual sense, but you can feel in your heart that everything is okay as it's happening. And that can help you to feel relaxed, at peace. You can relax a lot of the tensions in your body. You see, you're going to have a lot of different experiences that your mind has no reference to make sense of. And at a certain point, you live in that confused state for so long that you recognize that's just the way a spiritual awakening is. And then it drops the need to know. So, wherever you are around the world, whatever time that you're watching this video, thank you, thank you, thank you. Peace.